My job in the military, I was security for the chaplain. So chaplains are non-combatants, meaning they can't carry a weapon even for defense. And so they had someone like me, which is called a religious program specialist, RP for short. And so my job when that bomb went off was only for one thing. It was to protect that chaplain. So that bomb went off. I was thrown left unconscious and I couldn't see to my left or right. I had ringing in both of my ears. I didn't know if I had my limbs or not. All I knew is my whole right side of my body was completely numb. I still, even though I didn't have any external injuries, I still suffer from a lot from that impact itself. So I was thrown, saw the chaplain. I had straight tunnel vision, couldn't see to the left and right. Saw him on the ground trying to crawl. I somehow was able to pick myself up, grab the chaplain by the back of his flak and pull him underneath safety. And the reason why this is very important to be able to discuss is because from that day when we got ambushed, everything that I was trained to do from that day that I put my feet on those yellow footprints was for that one day we got ambushed. And this is the thing that reality check that every entrepreneur needs to understand. We are all going to get ambushed sometime in our business one day or another. It may not be an ambush like you getting blown up like I did. It may not be gunfire coming at you, but an ambush could be an employee quitting. An ambush could be a client quitting. That was one of your biggest high-paying clients. Ambush could be a COVID or a recession. Right. But I will tell you, those businesses that were able to thrive and push through during COVID or a recession are the ones that were prepared. They knew how to bounce back and come back and be able to move forward inside of their business.
All branding is personal. And it's not about who you say you are. It's about who you are and how you say it. I'm Hirsch Redroot, copywriter, comedian, and brand voice expert. I've helped hundreds of companies fine-tune their messaging, and now I'm sitting down with some of the most ambitious and imaginative founders around who share their seven-figure stories and their next-figure goals. Let's hit the brand voice runway. Today's episode of Brand Voice Runway delivers an emotional triumph story, one that's full of hope and inspiration. And if you've listened to any of my previous podcasts, then you know that to me, branding is always personal. It's the beating heart of business that really appeals to me and our individuality. I think the fact that no two individuals, much less categories of individuals, are the same. And so you're going to get that today with my guest who is coming to talk to us about his experiences and his road to success and how he helps others now achieve their success. And when I say that J.R. Spear is an incredible business leader and a combat war veteran, those two things I think go hand in hand because his resilience as an entrepreneur and as a human being are tied together. But I'm going to let him tell you more about his own story. First, welcome, JR. I am truly excited to have you on because it's so personal, because I think that while people want the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things they can do, what is the method? They want to hear about Creed. They want to hear about your network, what you've been able to do for other entrepreneurs and coaches. We'll talk about your book for sure. But I want to hear in your own words, your story, your personal story a little bit, if you would.
Yeah, well, I'll take it back to the early days where I came out of my mom kicking. And I say that as a joke, but it's actually the truth because I grew up in a family-owned business where my mom always owned a martial arts school, did fitness and martial arts since she was about 10 years old. And I got 4 sisters. We all kind of grew up in the family business as well. So, from the day that I could start walking, I was living and breathing that entire environment, which honestly helped change and, mold me to the person that I am today because being in that type of environment and family-owned business, I had to learn discipline and structure and just how families work together. It's like we all took a place. It's like when something needed to get done, we always, showed up to do it, which had me start teaching and leading since I was about 10 or 11 years old. I'll never forget that, that time and where as I think my mom was like sick or something like that. And then we had a bunch of classes going on in the evening and I'm not a black belt this time. I didn't get my first degree black belt until I was probably 15 years old. But, she had no one to be able to teach a class. And so it was like, oh, great. Who's going to step up? So she's like, hey, JR, I need you to go teach this. I was like, I never taught a class by myself. I held targets and different things like that, but never taught a whole class. But I was forced into it. And I was happy that I did because that's where I really started finding my passion for teaching. And even though I was this 10 or 11-year-old kid, I was able to lead a class of a bunch of teenagers and adults by myself. And then ever since that day, it just never stopped. And so I've been teaching since I was about that young.
Since you were 10. One thing I wanted to say is that the more I talk to people who were raised in a family business environment, the more I start to recognize how much more they learned than, let's say, someone whose mom or dad was in a corporate environment. Because in the corporate environment, you have the bring your child to work day and you have the stuff where they could share it with you. But sometimes that corporate structure doesn't really lend itself to, they weren't going to call you and say, JR, come and step in because, one of your parents can't do the meeting that day and step in. But when it's a family owned business, they can do that. And so that's tremendously valuable. What did it feel like to look at an audience at that age, if you can remember? I remember some of my 10-year-old, I
never, my mom always joked that JR never knew a stranger. I mean, everywhere I went, I was always there to serve and wanted to help people, and stand in front of a crowd and be able to teach. It never was in my DNA to get nervous or whatever, because I knew it. And I always had a sense of confidence in everything that I did, even from that young age. It's like, okay, I'm going to get up, I'm going to teach. It's like, we know that when you start the class, we bow in, we stretch, we warm up, then we do kicks and punches and blocks. We might practice our forms, katas, pumse, whatever they want to call it. And then we might do some one-step sparring or some kicking drills back and forth. So I had the confidence from a very young age just to be able to get up and take the authority from the stage to be able to lead people. And that is just something that always became natural to me. And I don't know, to me, when someone says they get nervous staying on stage or they get nervous to get up and teach, I can't relate to that, because for me, when you know your stuff and you're called to serve and to do it, you just do it. And it's just part of who I am. But
I just remember. No, go ahead, finish.
No, I was just saying, from a young age, it's just that's just what I've done. And I remember even growing up through middle school and high school, my mom brought me along she used to teach different programs in the local high schools and middle schools, take over a health class, and we do one-day seminars like self-defense, or we talk about awareness or date rape or whatever like that. And then once I got to high school, I was leading those classes. So I was traveling to a bunch of different high schools. I would skip school and go to these other schools, and I take over the business or the health class for the entire day to peers of my same age. And I'm teaching every single one of them about self-defense or whatever it could be. And so it really helped shape me who I am.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you nailed it by saying, while on the one hand, you can't relate to stage fright per se, but the preparation to me as a stand-up comedian and as a leader and speaker, and I know you do a lot of speaking as well, for me, it's about the prep. It's about knowing as much as you can know about the subject when you go in, and knowing what you're going to say, and then being able to go off script. You could take a journey off script if the moment's really right, keeping it fresh. You can tell a fresh story, something that just happened, but all that prep goes into it, and I think that's a big part of it. Let's talk about, obviously you've gotten involved in all kinds of businesses, martial arts, consulting, network, advertising, marketing. So
I want to hit on what you just talked about, and now it'll actually tie into my story from when I was in Iraq. Then I take those experiences to be able to help entrepreneurs, because you're absolutely right. It's the prep that actually make sure that builds that confidence in what you do. And, I'm sure people have heard this quote before, but I say it all the time. If you stay ready, you'll never have to get ready. And in martial arts, what you're constantly doing is building that muscle memory. So when you are getting ready to train for a competition, or if you actually had to use real life skills to protect yourself or someone else, you learn how to react without responding. And that only comes from confidence and prepping and knowing your stuff and just being able to get up there and do it. And I think that's why I've always been very confident, because I'm constantly staying in my craft. Everything that I do every single day from a young age is always doing what I do every day. So when I'm teaching on stuff that I do every day. I'm not teaching on something I just read in a book. I'm teaching on real life situations. I'm teaching on real tactics. I'm teaching on real strategies that I practice every single day. And therefore it makes it a lot easier to teach. And so I always like to tell the stories. When I got out of high school, I was not a person that wanted to stay in school. I didn't want to go to college. I didn't want to stay in the education. I wasn't the best student. And so I went into the military. And that was kind of the very best place for me, and just kind of getting away from, the trouble friends that I was hanging out with to, trying to start a new life. And my grandma was a huge influence and pushing me in that direction. I'm extremely thankful that she was. And that's a whole nother story in itself. But, my grandma, she was just She said, I was getting in trouble one day. She drove me to the recruiter station and was like, "Hey, you're not coming out until you sign up for the service." And so I knew at that time I was never going to say no to grandma. And I was like, okay. So I went in. And I knew I'd never go Army or Air Force just because, I just had a much higher respect for Navy and Marine Corps. My grandfather was retired Navy. My uncle was in the Marines. But at that moment when she told me to go in, I knew I didn't want to go in the Marines because they just worked too hard. So I was like, okay, I'll go in the Navy. And so I ended up signing up for the Navy my junior year of high school. And, during my junior and senior year, my life went to a whole different direction. I ended up rededicating my life to Christ, and I was getting back on track, hanging out with the right people, and just really becoming more focused. I went through like a year or two period in my life where I was just unfocused in what I was doing. But, kind of when I went in the military, from day one, you put your feet on those yellow footprints, they start conditioning you and training you with the way that you think, the way that you talk, the way that you act. Every single thing that you do from day one, when you get off that bus and put your feet on those yellow footprints, is to condition you for the day that you get ambushed. And I say that because, the ambush is a huge part of my story that ultimately, shifted everything in time in my life. And so I went in the military, and it was, August of 2003. And on February 7th, 2007, I survived a suicide bombing at a walking checkpoint in Barwana, Iraq, where I was standing only feet away from a guy that was coming through at a walking checkpoint close to a river. And as I walked in front of him, he lifted his arm, strapped a C4, and blew himself up. And that was like the deadliest and biggest bloodbath that I could imagine. And an entire movie can be made on this entire situation. And my sergeant major, who just walked by me and was standing in the same spot where I was at for about an hour, ended up paying the ultimate sacrifice. And another Marine that I was next to, David Emery, ended up losing both of his limbs. And then we lost our interpreter, another female Marine, and tons more injuries. And it was a very sad, horrible day. But as that bomb went off, I was thrown left unconscious to the ground. And my job in the military, even though I signed up for the Navy, and here's the sense of humor God has, is like I was signed up for the Navy because I didn't want to go to the Marine Corps, but I ended up spending my entire time with the Marine Corps. So it was, it was the best thing for me. But my job in the military, I was security for the chaplain. So chaplains are non-combatants, meaning they can't carry a weapon even for defense. And so they had someone like me, which is called a religious program specialist, RP for short. So they would call me RP. And so my job when that bomb went off was only for one thing. It was to protect that chaplain. So that bomb went off. I was thrown left unconscious, and I couldn't see to my left or right. I had ringing in both of my ears. I didn't know if I had my limbs or not. All I knew is my whole right side of my body was completely numb. I couldn't even lift my arm from my rifle or nothing. And even today, like when I feel the right side of my face like this, is a completely different sensation than the left side of my face. And I get the echo of my own voice every time I speak on my right side. It's like a vibration on my right side of my ear. And then having full rotation of my right arm is always extremely painful when I have to lift it up to the side. So I still, even though I didn't have any external injuries, I still suffer from a lot from that impact itself. So I was thrown, saw the chaplain. I had straight tunnel vision, couldn't see to the left and right. Saw him on the ground trying to crawl. I didn't know if he was hurt, if he was dead, or what happened. But I saw my first sergeant or gunny over in the distance trying to wave. Couldn't hear them screaming, but I somehow was able to pick myself up, grab the chaplain by the back of his flak, and pull him underneath safety. And the reason why this is very important to be able to discuss is because from that day when we got ambushed, everything that I was trained to do from that day that I put my feet on those yellow footprints was for that one day. That one day when we got ambushed, that one day when we had to respond, because I had to respond without thinking, and I did so without thinking. I knew exactly what to do. My job was to protect that chaplain, get him to safety, and help assess the area with the Marines to make sure there was no other danger. And I was able to move. I was able to respond. And I was able to react during that moment with pain, with headache, with not even be able to hear, not without being able to see anything, all those different emotions and feelings. I couldn't do it all, but I still was able to move and to react. And this is where entrepreneurs screw up. They don't do the things that it takes to actually build a business. They want everything be handed to them. They want to try to find some way, the easy ticket, the easy path to get from one place to another, but they never put in the reps themselves. There's a constant training that we have to build. So those people that have a struggle with their messaging, with the processes every single day, the day-to-day business. I mean, if there's a coach or a business owner out there that says, hey, you know what? I got everything done for the day or for the week. I'm going to go. I'm going to just go leave for a month. It's like, what? There's like a million things that we can be doing. You got to constantly be staying in the game. You got to constantly be doing things to do it. And now, am I saying that you can't go off and take time and vacation? Yes, absolutely. I mean, our job for growth in business is to making sure that we are creating the processes that allows us to delegate so we can eliminate us from the process so we can participate. But there's always going to be something that we can do. And people don't understand what that formula looks like when it comes to the growth of their business. And that's ultimately what I learned from the military. Is like, how many times did we have to get up at dark 30 to put on a 100-pound pack to go for a hike up the hill in the middle of the dark when you can't even see 5 feet in front of you with the guy, and hoping that you can get back with everyone at the same time? Numerous of times. How many times do we need to go for a run to condition our bodies? How many times do we have to sit through a classroom when we're only going on like 1 to 2 hours of sleep? Everything that we did was to help educate us, condition us, train us from our health, from our education, the way we thought, the way that we talked, the way that we walked, the way that we ran. Everything we did was to prepare us for that day that we got ambushed. And this is the thing, that reality check that every entrepreneur needs to understand. We are all going to get ambushed sometime in our business one day or another. But what is that ambush? It may not be an ambush like you getting blown up like I did. It may not be gunfire coming at you. But an ambush could be an employee quitting. An ambush could be a client quitting. That was one of your biggest high-paying clients. Ambush could be a COVID or a recession.
Right.
Like how many people struggled during that time? A lot of businesses. But I will tell you, those businesses that were able to thrive and push through during COVID or a recession are the ones that were prepared. They had the systems in place. They put in the reps. They knew that if something would happen, that they knew how to bounce back and come back and be able to move forward inside of their business. And that's ultimately what I teach my clients is how can we create the systems and processes that prepares you for the day that you get ambushed? Because, for me, when my middle son, he's 5.5 years old now, when he was about 18 months old, he was put in the hospital and almost died from a respiratory disease. And he was on an incubator and breathing tubes and everything for over 2.5 weeks. Well, during those 2.5 weeks and even longer, I had to be, I couldn't work. I was in the hospital with them, and I had, we didn't leave his bedside. I mean, we just lived on hospital food, and family came and dropped stuff off. And I did not once during that time did I think about or worry about my business. Is because I had systems in place. I had a team in place. I had things moving in the right direction, and my business did not skip a beat. I was able to move forward. I was able to react. And when I was able to come back to work, people were receptive and understanding, and we were still able to move forward like nothing happened. But if it wasn't for me being able to put those things in place and be able to prepare for a situation like that, I would never have been able to do it. And most business owners, they can't do that. Like if they didn't show up to work, their business would fail. I mean, if there was a recession, I can't tell you how many business owners right now that I keep hearing, it's like, a recession is coming. Are you ready? And it's like, I didn't even feel the last recession. Why would I even feel this one? We just find ways to pick up and move. And, it's just a matter of learning to be able to respond. And that's all part of putting in the reps. That's all part of continued education, making sure you have the systems, making sure you have the team, making sure you're showing up every day to do something inside of your business. So that way you're constantly moving forward and having constant growth. So but that's ultimately what I teach.
There's so much, JR, to kind of dig into here, both personally and professionally for me. Personally, it resonates with me because my dad was in the chaplaincy during the Korean War. Yeah. And it was getting a sense of how that works and, and then not kind of practicing as a rabbi or anything. After he went into the professional world, he went to study law and became an attorney in private practice. But my uncle's a rabbi, still a rabbi in his 90s, still carrying that persona every day. And so the appreciation, I mean, thank you so much for your service. I haven't said that yet, but it really means something personal to me when I hear that. And then, of course, the idea that you never know what the training is for in a way specifically. Mm-hmm. You just don't. The ambush concept is so palpable and we all relate to it. And of course, it's all about perspective. If something happens in our business that could feel existential to us, right? Yeah. And can be. And that training, that prep is indispensable. And you never know. That to me, it's like I finally realized after being in business for decades that I was almost thrilled by the examples where preparation paid off. Not that I looked for any of those fires to get lit and have to put them out. But even with my kids, when I have 5, I'm blessed to have 5 kids and a grandchild. And even when I have all of that, those things that pop up, you're like, wow, man, it's just okay. I'm ready. It's good that I'm ready for this. I never knew what this was going to be. I didn't expect this from the oldest to the youngest. Another personal thing was that my oldest son he was hospitalized with something at 3, something called orbital cellulitis, and it required him being in the hospital for a couple of weeks. And it's that same thing that you couldn't pick out of a book an issue, a medical issue or a financial issue or a business issue, and I'm sure like that we've both read a lot of books on business. You can get all kinds of stuff on business that will help prepare you. But I think that knowing that you need that preparation, knowing that you need something, and organization and commitment as early as possible, is probably an important lesson. But what made you, you had started businesses, you had successful businesses. What made you want to transition into coaching, specifically coaching versus just being successful? You could have applied the lessons, that you learned into your own business, but there's a different level there.
Yeah. Going back to my young age, I always loved teaching. And when I got back from Iraq in 2007, so the suicide bombing happened on February 7th of 2007. We got back from deployment May 31st of 2007. And I was out of the military by July 10th, just like almost a little bit longer than a month after getting back from combat. And, it's a culture shock when you come back from the Middle East and you're doing this day to day. I mean, I was gone for almost an entire year, and you have the day-to-day operations. I mean, you're seeing things that people don't see. Your everyday life is just survival. And so when you come back to civilian life and trying to figure out, I was like, okay, how do I fit in? I didn't know what I was going to do. I was already planning on, at this time I matured a lot, and I was already planning on going to college. So I ended up going to Bible college for 1 semester out of St. Louis, Missouri, where I'm originally from, and did that for 1 semester. But then I didn't know what I was going to do for work. And I was like, okay, I have a little bit of surplus I saved up while I was deployed, but that was only going to last me for so long. And so I wanted to start a business. Well, only thing I could really think about, the only skill set that I really had was teaching martial arts. It's like, okay, I went and opened up a martial arts school. My mom, when I left for the military, she pretty much she closed down her school. And because, I was a big part of, what it was growing up. And so she stopped teaching full time and got into real estate, but she kept a program going where she was teaching like maybe 1 or 2 days a week and had like maybe 5 clients. So I told her, I was like, look, I'm going to open up a school because this is what I know how to do. I know how to teach. I trained Marines and sailors while I was in the military. And I even taught some martial arts schools at the place wherever I was stationed at. So that's what I knew how to do. I didn't know how to do business though. And so I remember when I first did the martial arts school, I found a cheap space that the guy gave me like $500 a month for rent for like the first year, and then it bumped it to like $1,000. So it's super, super cheap rent that I found. Now the downfall was, it was a piece of mess. It was a hole. But I ended up to using my own resources, my friends, to come and redo it all in construction. And, the agreement was that he wouldn't touch any of the construction, and I did it all. So I did what I learned in the military. You just, get to work, hands and knees, and scrub the floors, clean the walls, and paint and everything else. So got it up and working, getting the martial arts school going. And I hired my mom to work for me as an employee and brought her on. And because I didn't know business, I knew I needed a mentor. I needed a coach. And I didn't know what the coaching world looked like. And my mom is the one that kind of introduced me to this organization called Maya, which was out of Century Martial Arts. And Maya is a consulting agency where they helped martial arts school owners, start, grow, and build their businesses. Oh. So when I signed up with Maya, I had absolutely no money at all. I got a credit card, put it on, and started paying it. And then my coach, whose name is Mike Metzger, and I'm still connected with him today, he taught me some of the most valuable lessons about business that I still implement today. And I've used in 6 different businesses that I built over 16 and a half years of running businesses. And you asked, your question was, how did I know I would want to get in coaching? Well, I knew from that day one, when I started working with him, that when I got out that first call, I said, I want to do what you do someday. Because it was so I can tell like what he was teaching was so impactful that I wanted to make that difference for other small business owners and help them create the opportunities that they didn't think was possible. Because at that moment, I was selling month-to-month programs for like $50 a month for martial arts, which is not a sustainable way to build a business. I could barely keep the lights on the place, much less, put food on the table. And so when he started teaching me all the skill sets, just a few was how to create offers, how to actually market, how to run events, and how to close, and from from many to one. So he's closing in a group. And so when he showed me how to create the offers and run my first event and then do a big group close at that event, I went from like barely making $500 a month in the martial arts to, in that day, I probably put $5,000 to $7,000 cash in my pocket, plus an additional $3,000 to $10,000 in monthly reoccurring revenue. And that's when the light bulb clicked. I was like, whoa, this was the most powerful. I was terrified. Like when I was doing that group, doing that first event, and I was doing the close, I wasn't scared of doing the group close, but I was terrified. I was like, okay, is this going to work? Type of thing. And follow the step-by-step process. I did the value stack. I had multiple different upgrades, and then it worked. And then I've been able to do that. So I had the martial arts school. After a few years, I sold the business over to my mom. And then I launched a PowerFit Bootcamp, which in less than 18 months, I expanded that to 4 different cities. And then after I did that for about a decade, and then when we moved to the East Coast, with my wife, and now I have 3 and almost 4 kids, I've been able to duplicate it in multiple different industries, the same exact steps and processes. And that's what led me to today. But I knew from that day one of working with that coach that this is what I wanted to do. And when I was running the martial arts school, or not martial arts, when I was running my fitness business, I had a lot of employees, like instructors working for me and personal trainers. So I had probably more than 30 instructors working for me at one time. And I was always teaching them about sales and marketing and teaching and time management and everything like that. So it was an easy transition when I got out and left the fitness to teaching, coaches. And I started out only teaching personal trainers, nutritionists, and those in the health and wellness space, because that's what I knew. And then it eventually evolved where I ended up helping, all small business owners and different walks of life. And now I really narrowed down to speakers, coaches, and authors is kind of like my niche where I'm at.
Right. And now after this next piece, I want to talk about the book a little bit, but I find it really interesting that, you were imparting kind of sales knowledge to physical trainers, to martial arts trainers, right? So it was like a 2-pronged process in a way that, that prepared them. I mean, you were doing it, I guess, at the time to prepare them, but in a way that ended up being, your business, your next phase of business. So this
I knew I couldn't be everywhere at one time. And the sales starts from the first conversation that you have with someone. And so if I have someone bringing a guest to one of my bootcamp classes and I'm not there to do it, they had to know how to interact with that person, how to follow up with them, how to actually close them on the membership. And so I relied heavily on what they've been able to do to actually sell for me to continue growth. So, I mean, take the military, for example. I mean, there's the chain of command for a reason. I mean, when we go into the military as an enlisted personnel or even an officer, we're all taking out the trash in the beginning. And then eventually you earn a little bit of rank, and the people that are above you are looking out for the people under you. So you go from like a lance corporal to like an NCO, being a corporal or sergeant or whatever. And then you go up to a staff sergeant. Well, the corporals are looking after the lance corporals, the staff sergeants looking after the sergeants and the corporals. And then you got even the sergeant majors looking after everyone. And so you're only going to be as good as your team and your leadership. So you're constantly training the people under you so that they can train the people underneath them. And if you continue that same growth and that same chain of command, then you can definitely build a huge empire.
Also, it brings a question, which is every, a lot of people think, okay, well, I'm not a leader, but it does seem like in every role, there's a leadership capacity, because ultimately you're going to hopefully move up. A lot of not people aren't, even people who aren't particularly ambitious. Oh, I have to have my own business, or I have to be a speaker or a coach, but we don't sometimes even choose those things. It's just, there's a natural progression. You want to do more for your family. You want to grow as a person. Do you think that there are leaders and followers, or what's your thought on that?
Yeah, that's a big question. I mean, kind of, there's the old saying that you have to learn how to follow before you can be a good leader. And, that's true in a lot of different aspects. But the thing is, if you want to be a great leader, you have to learn how to actually continue to educate and grow and follow other people that are better than you in the first place. You never want to be the smartest person in the room to be able to continue to grow yourself. I have come across some people, in my life, not a lot, but a handful of people that they don't want to step into a leadership position. They want to stay kind of like behind the scenes, the lowest total, even if it included a higher pay in what they do. But for the most part, we, as a human being, I think it's our moral obligation that we always look for that continued growth and moving forward in life. And to do so, it requires you to teach the people underneath you. I mean, that to me, that's just part of evolution of life, is like you take your knowledge and then you teach the people underneath you of what you know so you can continue to grow yourself. But yeah, I mean, leadership, I don't know if I really agree with saying leaders are born, but we are all can be taught to be great leaders.
Yeah. And the key word may be teaching, in that, leading and teaching are not necessarily the same thing. Teaching, I look at teaching as sharing. Teaching doesn't put me on a pedestal just because I'm helping to educate someone else. I look at it as I'm imparting something, I'm sharing something with them. They can share it with them. It may have something to do with age and experience by nature, but it isn't, okay, I'm the teacher, and you're the student. It's,
yes,
sharing.
Yeah. So something was told to me years ago, and I forget, I can't even pinpoint when I actually learned this, but a great leader is not something like, it hits on exactly what you're talking about. It's not just a teacher, but a great leader is one that can influence another to move. So when you can influence someone else to make change and be able to move, that's what a great leader is. We can all give a motivational speak, and we can all get out there and teach something that you learned in a book. There's a lot of teachers out there, but they don't know past what's printed on the pages. They don't have real life experience to be able to move. But real leaders, great leaders, not just real leaders, but great leaders are the ones that know how to influence others to be able to move. Yeah. And when you can influence others to be able to move and to do it well, that's what a great leader is. But there's a lot of teachers out there that are not great leaders. But if you want to be a great leader, you have to know how to influence others.
Yeah. And this goes to something that I'm passionate about, which is brand voice. Obviously I call the show Brand Voice Runway, and that's for a reason, because no matter where you start from, you're always kind of taking your voice. And like you pointed out, JR, you have to sometimes have your staff, your team is an extension of you. They have to represent you. And it's the same in the military. You're representing, your unit, you're part of the armed forces, and then you're representing your country, So your ideals are reflected in how people talk about you. And so how did you use your voice, let's say, to build a following, to build a community around your message?
Yeah. So, there's a lot of different ways I did it, but I'll just speak for my coaching business itself. But, I take the same concepts when I did in the fitness and martial arts, and even when I was in advertising, is, first off, you have to understand what a community is and the vision and the purpose behind what you want to build. And I always like to use the example of like a church. Whether anyone listening to this, if they're a Christian or if they're not a Christian, that's beside the point. But most people know what a church is. And no one can influence or get people to move or volunteer their hard-earned hours and time to be able to run the organization of a church for free. If you go to a church, my church that I go to, there's hundreds and hundreds of volunteers every single Sunday morning, and every single one of them are doing it completely for free. And they do so during the week, and they're probably giving up 10, sometimes some of them maybe 15, 20 plus hours a week for free. Why is that? So if you really grasp like the concept of how churches are able to get volunteers to do something for free, is because they're getting people bought into the community and the vision of what they believe in, which is, in a Christian church, is Jesus Christ and the message of Jesus Christ, and be able to disciple others to bring them in to, with the same message. So if you take that same concept, whether Christian or not, and apply it to your own business and really think about community, how can you get people believe and bought into your vision of what you want to instill, like what you believe? And when you can build that culture around your vision, you can establish a strong community, and therefore you're going to create raving fans that ultimately is going to want to stay with you forever, and eventually, want to buy your products, services, whatever you want to do. But I think community is like the very first part that understand your purpose and your vision, your identity, and your messaging for brand awareness is first. But once you understand that, you need to build a community around that of raving fans that ultimately is going to help feed your products and services, because they're going to start believing in who you are. But that's ultimately what I did. It's like, I found a group of individuals that believe in the same vision that I had, that want help with what I'm an expert, or what I feel that I'm great at teaching people how to do, and influence them to be better. And I started, finding opportunities to build a community, Facebook group, plus group calls and everything else that fed my high ticket services. And it's the same flow that I just rinse and repeat all the time, but it all starts with vision and community.
If you've enjoyed this episode of Brand Voice Runway, please leave a 5-star review and subscribe to the podcast. The positive reinforcement keeps us going. Who am I kidding? Founders like us keep going regardless. Thanks so much for listening, and make tomorrow greater than today.